When my son screamed, "You will either cook for my wife or get out of my apartment," I didn't argue back. Instead, I smiled, picked up my purse and walked out, leaving behind the apartment I had been paying rent for. He expected me to cry and beg like before. But this time, things were different. A week later, I had 18 missed calls, and that was just the beginning of my plan. They would regret every harsh word and cruel action. Before we continue, first, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Stacy Stewart from Bakersfield, California. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. My shopping list was still in my pocket when I walked through the apartment door, arms full of groceries from the market. The Tuesday evening sun came through the kitchen window, making everything look warm and bright. Usually this made me happy. Not today. Jessica was sitting at my dining table, painting her nails bright pink. Her feet were up on the chair I bought with my pension money. The nail polish bottle sat open, making the whole room smell terrible. She didn't even look up from her nails when she spoke. "Hey, make me a sandwich while you're in the kitchen." I put the heavy grocery bags on the counter slowly. My arms hurt from carrying milk and bread up 3 flights of stairs. The plastic handles had made red marks on my hands. "Excuse me," said. "You heard me." Jessica kept painting her nails. "Turkey and cheese. Not that cheap lunch meat you eat. Something good." Something cold filled my chest. I had bought that expensive turkey meat just for her and my son. Spent my Social Security check on food I couldn't afford. "Jessica, I just got home. I need to put away these groceries first." Now she looked at me with that look that made me feel small and stupid. "What's the big deal? You're already standing there." "I'm busy doing my nails." The big deal was that this was my apartment and I was tired of being treated like a servant. Jessica put her hands flat on the table to dry. "Look, Margaret, you live in our home now. We let you stay here because you help us out." The word "let" hit me like a slap. I'd been paying the rent for 8 months while they looked for work. I'd been buying the food while they spent their money on movies and restaurants. Jessica stood up and walked closer to me. At 25, she was taller and stronger than me. But I had been dealing with mean people long before she was born. "Your son and I have been talking. If you want to keep living here peacefully, you need to help out more. Simple as that." The front door opened. My son David appeared with his laptop bag, looking tired from his part-time job at the coffee shop. He saw Jessica standing over me and the tension in the room. "What's happening here?" His voice sounded annoyed, like I was causing trouble. "Your mother is being difficult," Jessica said, not moving away from me. "I asked her to make me a sandwich and she's acting like it's some huge problem." David looked at me with disappointment, the same look he gave me when he was a teenager and didn't get his way. "Mom, just make her the sandwich. It's not worth fighting about." But Jessica wasn't done. She stepped even closer. Close enough that I could smell her perfume mixed with nail polish. "Here's how this works, Margaret. You live in our apartment. You help us out. That means when I ask you to do something, you do it. No questions asked. No attitude. Or apartment." My voice stayed calm even though my heart was beating fast. "That's right," David said, standing next to his wife like they were a team against me. "Mom, you need to decide right now. Either you help Jessica and do what she asks, or you can pack your things and leave." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. I looked at my son, trying to find any sign of the little boy who used to run to me when he had bad dreams. All I saw was Jessica's mean look on his face. "All right," I said quietly. Jessica smiled, thinking she had won. "Good. Now about that sandwich." "I'll pack," I said. The smile died on her face. David's mouth opened like he expected me to say sorry and shuffled to the kitchen like a beaten dog. I turned toward the hallway, leaving the grocery bags right where they were. Behind me, I heard Jessica gasp and David whisper, "Mom, wait." But I was already walking toward my bedroom, my feet steady on the carpet David and I had picked out together when he first moved here. The suitcase came down from the closet with a soft sound. I had bought it for a trip to Florida with my sister, back when my husband was still alive and money wasn't so tight. Now it sat open on my bed, waiting to hold what was left of my life in this apartment. Packed carefully. Underwear, socks, for changes of clothes. Not everything, just what I needed. From the living room came whispered arguing. Jessica's voice getting higher. David's getting more worried. They were trying to figure out what to do about the old woman who had finally said no. My hands moved without thinking, folding dresses and rolling up stockings. The photo of my husband went into the side pocket, wrapped in tissue. My pills, my reading glasses, the small notebook where I wrote down every penny I spent. When I rolled my suitcase down the hallway, they stopped talking. Jessica had sat back down at the table, but she looked different now. Worried. Scared. David stood by the kitchen, arms crossed, trying to look angry but really looking confused. Neither of them said goodbye. My old Honda started right away, reliable as always. I backed out of the parking space without looking up at the apartment window to see if they were watching. The 20-minute drive to Sunset Manor gave me time to think. Memories came flooding back as I drove through downtown Millfield. David's daycare fees when he was little. $200 every week for 2 years while I worked double shifts at the diner. I had been so tired my feet swelled up every night. His high school graduation party cost me $800 because he wanted it to be special for his friends. Then came college. $15,000 a year for that community college because David said he needed the full experience. I had worked extra hours cleaning offices at night, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash while other grandmothers were home watching TV. His wedding to Jessica cost $8,000. Her family said they were too busy to help pay, so I covered everything quietly. I didn't want to embarrass anyone. The flowers, the cake, the hall rental. Everything had to be perfect for my son's big day. Then came the apartment troubles. $900 every month for their rent because young couples need help getting started. That's what mothers did, I told myself. That's what David's father would have wanted. The monthly bills followed like clockwork. $900 for rent, $200 for electricity, $300 for groceries when money got tight. My Social Security check disappeared into their lives piece by piece, and I convinced myself it was love. Sunset Manor sat at the edge of town, a clean white building with a sign that said, Extended Stay Suites. The room was small but nice. A bed, a chair, a tiny table by the window. I put my suitcase on the stand and sat down hard on the bed. The quiet was different here. Not the comfortable quiet of my own space, but the empty quiet of a place where nobody knew me. I took out my phone and looked through my contacts. Bank numbers, insurance companies, credit card customer service. Numbers I knew by heart from years of managing my money carefully. Tomorrow was Wednesday, but some things could still be done. Some calls could still be made. I opened my tablet on the small table and logged into my bank account. The numbers glowed on the screen. Checking account, savings, retirement money. Numbers that meant a lifetime of hard work, of skipping little treats so I could take care of my family. The cursor blinked, waiting for me to decide what to do next. Wednesday morning came gray and cloudy, matching how I felt inside. I spread my papers across the hotel table like a general planning a war. Bank statements, insurance papers, legal documents, everything organized and ready. The first call went to Valley National Bank. Wednesday morning services were limited, but computer systems never slept. Good morning, Mrs. Patterson, the lady said after I pressed all the right buttons. How can we help you today? I need to stop the automatic rent payment for Maple Street Apartments, Unit 3B. Account ending in 7829. Oz. Keys clicking on her computer. Ma'am, I see that payment has been going out for 8 months. Are you sure you want to stop it? Completely sure. May I ask why? The renters can no longer count on my financial help. More clicking. Okay, Mrs. Patterson. The automatic payment will stop right away. You'll get a letter about this in 3 business days. The second call was easier. State Farm had been covering both their phones on my plan for 6 months. Jessica's iPhone, David's Android. $120 every month for phones I never used. Bills for calls I never made. I need to remove 2 phones from my family plan, I told the agent. My son and daughter-in-law need to get their own service now. When would you like this to happen? Today. The credit cards took longer. David was an authorized user on 2 of my cards, Visa and the store card from Target. $400 every month I had been paying for things I never bought, purchases I never made. Mrs. Patterson, removing authorized users means they'll need to apply for their own credit cards, the Visa lady explained. Any money they owe will still be your responsibility, but they won't be able to spend any more. I understand. Remove them right now. Each call felt like taking off heavy chains. 35 years of working as a waitress had taught me how systems worked, what words to use, how to get things done. Everything I was doing was completely legal and within my rights. The life insurance change needed paperwork mailed in, but I started the process. $50,000 that was supposed to go to David. Money I had saved to protect my family's future. But family meant something different now. By lunchtime I had made 6 calls. Rent payments stopped, phone service cancelled, credit cards blocked. All the automatic money that had been draining my accounts for months. All of it ended with polite conversations and reference numbers. I sat back in the cheap hotel chair and looked at my notes. Reference numbers, confirmation codes, dates when everything would stop. The paper trail of my independence. My phone sat quiet on the table. No missed calls, no urgent messages. They didn't know yet. Probably wouldn't know until the first payment didn't go through. Until the first bill came with their names on it instead of mine. But they would know soon enough. I closed my tablet and walked to the window. Across the parking lot, an elderly man was helping his wife into their car, holding her arm gently as she got settled. They were probably going to visit family or maybe to the doctor. I envied their teamwork, the way they took care of each other with gentle patience. My husband and I had been like that once. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I let it ring. The week went by quietly for me, but clearly not for them. I had found a routine at Sunset Manor. Coffee in the lobby, breakfast at the diner across the street, long walks around Millfield's peaceful neighborhoods. My phone collected missed calls like leaves in autumn. By Thursday there were 9 messages. By Saturday 18. I listened to them in order, watching them go from confused to angry to desperate. The first few were almost casual. David asking if there was some kind of mistake with the rent payment. Jessica leaving short, annoyed messages about the phone service being turned off. But by Friday, panic had set in. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" David's voice cracked with worry. "The landlord says you stopped the rent payment. He wants the full amount by Monday or we're getting evicted." Jessica's messages got meaner and meaner. "Margaret, you need to fix this right now. People are asking questions about our phone bills. You're making us look like we can't pay our own way." The later calls sounded like begging. David crying, promising they would work something out if I just called back. Jessica trying to be nice, saying she was sorry for being harsh and wanted to make things right. I deleted each message after listening, feeling nothing but mild curiosity about their growing panic. Friday afternoon brought a knock at my hotel room door. Through the peephole I saw them both. David in his work clothes, Jessica in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, both looking like they hadn't slept well. I opened the door but didn't let them in. "Mom." David's eyes were red and puffy. His usual confidence was gone. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the fact that you're trying to ruin our lives over some stupid fight about a sandwich." Jessica pushed forward, her face red with anger. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said calmly. "I'm simply not paying for your lives anymore." "The rent, Mom." David's voice got louder. "You can't just stop paying the rent. That's our home. Actually, it's my money paying for your home. My name on the bank account. My signature on the payments. You two were just guests." Jessica grabbed David's arm as he stepped toward the door. "Mom, please. We can fix this. Jessica was wrong to talk to you that way. We both were. But you can't just abandon us with no warning, no discussion. You gave me an ultimatum, I reminded her. Do what Jessica says or get out. Those were your exact words. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. I looked at my son, seeing a stranger wearing his face. You meant every single word. You just didn't think I would choose to leave. Jessica tried a different approach, making her voice artificially sweet. Look, we all said things we regret. But you're talking about our home, our credit, our whole future. You can't just pull everything away like this. I can, and I did. I started to close the door. You wanted me to leave. Left. You wanted to handle your own lives. Now you can. Mom, wait. David's voice broke. What about family? What about everything we've shared together? I paused, looking at his desperate face. For a moment, I remembered the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who brought me drawings he made at school. But that little boy had grown into a man who could stand by while his wife treated his mother like a servant in her own home. Family works both ways, sweetie, I said quietly. I spent 8 months taking care of you both. When it was time for you to take care of me, you chose her demands instead. Jessica's fake sweetness cracked. You crazy old lady. You can't just. I can call security if you keep yelling, I interrupted. This is private property and you're disturbing other guests. They stared at me, probably seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Not the soft-hearted mother and future grandmother. Not the convenient ATM machine with legs. Just a woman who had finally learned to say no. Jessica grabbed David's elbow. Come on, we'll figure this out ourselves. They walked back to their car, Jessica's attitude replaced by worried slouching. David looking back over his shoulder like he was seeing a stranger. I watched them drive away, then closed the door and went back to my tablet. There were still calls to make, still accounts to close. The work of ending a one-sided relationship was far from finished. I needed coffee and time to think clearly. The diner on Oak Street had always been my safe place when my husband was alive. He would meet me there after work, and we'd share a piece of chocolate cake while talking about our day. Thursday morning found me walking the familiar 2 blocks, my breath visible in the cool mountain air. The routine felt comforting after yesterday's confrontation. I had organized my paperwork again this morning, reviewing bank statements and confirmation numbers like a general studying battle plans. The diner's bell rang as I walked in. Coffee smells and bacon grease created that comfortable fog of normalcy I needed. I had barely sat down in my usual corner booth when a familiar voice called out, "Margaret Patterson!" Well, look who's here. Linda Wilson stood up from a table by the door, newspaper folded under her arm. We had worked together at Miller's Diner for 12 years before she retired and moved to the senior apartments. Linda had worked the morning shift while I handled evenings, but we had shared enough coffee breaks to become good friends. Linda. I stood to hug her. So good to see you. Mind if I sit with you? Haven't seen you since Frank's funeral. She slid into the seat across from me without waiting for an answer. Heard you moved out to Sunset Manor. Is everything okay? The waitress brought coffee before I could answer. I used the pause to think about how much to share. Linda was trustworthy, but she was also the biggest gossip in town. Family issues, I said finally. Needed some space to figure things out. Linda nodded slowly, studying my face. That daughter-in-law of yours tried to return some expensive makeup to Peterson's drugstore last month. My grandson works there. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. What kind of makeup? The fancy kind they keep behind the counter. $200 worth of stuff. But when they looked up the receipt, it was paid for with a credit card that had your name on it. The diner's noise seemed to fade away. My credit card. That's right. She said it was a gift from you, but Jimmy, that's my grandson. He said she seemed nervous. Like she was lying. I put my cup down carefully, thinking about this new information. When exactly did this happen? 2 weeks ago, maybe 3. Jimmy handled the return personally because of the amount. My mind raced. 3 weeks ago, Jessica had been using my credit card to buy expensive makeup, then returning it for cash. This wasn't just about me paying their bills. This was deliberate stealing. Did they give her the cash? Jimmy said they have to give cash back when it's returned within 30 days. Store policy. Linda leaned forward, lowering her voice. Margaret, he wasn't just suspicious about the return. She was asking questions about other expensive items, like she was planning to come back. The implications hit me like ice water. 2 weeks ago, Jessica had been planning to steal more from me. This wasn't desperation from our current situation. This was calculated theft that had been going on for who knows how long. Did Jimmy report it? They noted it in their system and kept copies of everything. Technically, since the card wasn't reported stolen, it's a gray area. But Jimmy kept records just in case. Linda studied my face. You really didn't know about this. I shook my head, thinking about all those monthly credit card payments I'd been making. All the dinners where David complained about money troubles while Jessica was secretly stealing from me behind my back. What was she planning to do with the cash? Linda glanced around the diner, then leaned closer. Word around town is Jessica has been shopping for a car. Something expensive. Sarah at the car lot mentioned a young woman matching her description looking at cars she couldn't possibly afford. I did remember Sarah Jenkins. We had served on the library fundraising committee together, and her daughter had been in David's class. If Sarah had information about Jessica's car shopping, it was probably accurate. Linda, thank you for telling me this. I pulled out my wallet to pay for coffee I had barely touched. Margaret, be careful. A woman who steals from family might do other desperate things when she gets cornered. I walked back to Sunset Manor with my mind spinning. Jessica's sandwich demand and rudeness suddenly made more sense. She had already been stealing from me for weeks, treating me like a personal bank account she could access whenever she wanted. The ultimatum wasn't about getting respect. It was about keeping control over the money she believed she was entitled to take. Back in my hotel room, I opened my tablet and created a new document called Jessica Thompson, Evidence. Linda's information was just the beginning. If Jessica had been lying about this, what else had she been hiding? The police station was only 6 blocks away. I had 2 hours before they closed for the day. After lunch, I walked straight from the diner to the Millfield Police Department, a modern brick building that used to intimidate me as a young woman, but now seemed like an ally. The front desk was staffed by a young officer who handled my complaint with professional attention. Mrs. Patterson, you're saying your daughter-in-law used your credit card without permission? He looked at the Peterson's drugstore receipt I'd gotten from Linda, comparing it to my credit card statement. Yes. I never gave her permission to use my card, and I never authorized these purchases. What kind of purchases are we talking about? I had prepared for this question. Makeup returned for cash. According to the store clerk, she was asking about other expensive items she could return for cash later. He stamped the papers with official authority. This constitutes credit card fraud. We'll need to contact the store for their security footage and transaction records. How long will that take? Detective Martinez handles financial crimes. She'll probably want to interview you within 48 hours. I thanked him and collected my copies, feeling the weight of legal authority behind my actions. No more stealing, no more emotional manipulation. Everything was going through proper channels now. My next stop was Valley National Bank. Detective Martinez's office was in the downtown branch, a cramped space filled with file cabinets and computer printouts. Detective Martinez was younger than I expected, but her handshake was firm and confident. Mrs. Patterson, what brings you here today? Credit card fraud. My daughter-in-law has been using my card without permission and converting purchases to cash. I explained the situation briefly. The ultimatum, my departure, the discovery of Jessica's unauthorized spending. Detective Martinez listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on her pad. Jessica Thompson is definitely known to local merchants, she said when I finished. Several stores have reported suspicious returns in the past month. Always expensive items, always returned for cash. Any idea how much money we're talking about? Different stores, different amounts. Based on what we've tracked so far, probably $800 to $1,000 total. The numbers shocked me. Jessica had been living in my apartment, eating my food, demanding my service while secretly stealing enough money to make a car payment. Who are these stores? Mix of drugstores, department stores, and electronic shops. All places that sell expensive items that can be easily returned. Detective Martinez shrugged. The pattern suggests someone building up cash for a major purchase. What's the timeline looking like? She's been doing this for about a month. Most stores keep security footage for 90 days, so we have good evidence. Mrs. Patterson, this is definitely criminal fraud. I left the police station with a clearer picture of my daughter-in-law's activities. The stealing explained her confidence, her attempt to control me with ultimatums, and her increasing demands for service. I wasn't just a convenient funding source. I was her primary target for theft. That evening, I sat in my hotel room reviewing the day's discoveries. Police report filed and investigation started. Confirmation of Jessica's stealing and fraudulent activities. A growing network of professional allies who understood the real situation. I opened my tablet and updated my evidence file, adding Detective Martinez's information to Linda Wilson's discoveries. Pattern recognition had been a crucial skill in restaurant work, and the patterns here were becoming crystal clear. Jessica wasn't just disrespectful or entitled. She was a thief, a liar, and dangerous. The more pressure she felt, the more reckless she would become. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. Tomorrow, I would start making strategic calls to David's employer, not to get him in trouble, but to make sure they knew about potential financial problems that might affect his work performance. The truth was always the best protection. Word travels fast in a town like Millfield. By Monday, I realized it was time to tell my side of the story. My first encounter happened at the grocery store, where Mrs. Chen from the church baking committee cornered me near the bread aisle. She was one of those women who knew everyone's business and wasn't afraid to ask direct questions. "Margaret, dear, I've been hearing concerning things about family troubles. Are you doing all right?" I thought carefully about my response. Mrs. Chen would repeat whatever I said to at least 20 people by Wednesday's church service. David and Jessica asked me to move out, so I did. Sometimes adult children need to learn to handle their own responsibilities. Her eyebrows shot up. "They asked you to leave your own apartment that you've been paying for? It seemed like the best solution for everyone involved. But didn't you pay for David's college and help them when they got married?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I always wondered how they afforded that nice apartment on his part-time salary." I nodded but didn't give details. The facts would speak for themselves. My next stop was Miller's Diner, where I had worked for 15 years before retiring. Tom Miller, the owner's son, looked up from counting receipts with genuine concern. "Margaret, heard you're staying out at Sunset Manor. What's going on?" 3 other employees gathered around as I explained the situation briefly. Their reactions were immediate and unanimous. Shocked that Jessica had treated me so disrespectfully, angry that I had been supporting them financially for months without any appreciation. "You paid for his college tuition." Sarah, the morning shift manager, shook her head in disbelief. "David told everyone his family was helping him out. Said they were doing you a favor by letting you live with them." "David said a lot of things that weren't true," I replied calmly. Tom's expression darkened. "That explains why Jessica always seemed to have money for expensive clothes, but David never picked up extra shifts when we offered them. Those shopping trips were probably funded with stolen credit card returns," muttered Lisa from behind the counter. By the time I left the diner, I knew the real story would be all over town within hours. Millfield's small-town network was more efficient than any newspaper. My third stop was St. Paul's Methodist Church, where Pastor Johnson was preparing for the evening service. He invited me into his office, offering tea and a chair that had comforted many troubled parishioners over the years. "Margaret, several people have mentioned they're worried about you. Can you help me understand what's happening? I appreciated Pastor Johnson's direct approach. He wasn't looking for gossip. He was trying to help a member of his congregation. Pastor, I've been financially supporting my son and daughter-in-law for 8 months. Last week, they made it clear that my presence in the apartment was conditional on following Jessica's orders. I chose to leave rather than accept that arrangement. That must have been incredibly hurtful. It was eye-opening, I said honestly. I love my son, but I won't be treated like a servant by someone who's been stealing from me. Pastor Johnson nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes loving someone means letting them face the consequences of their choices. It sounds like you've been protecting them from those consequences for quite a while. Too long, I think. During my walk back to the hotel, I stopped at Corner Coffee for an afternoon latte. The place was busy with the usual Monday crowd: retirees, off-duty workers, mothers with toddlers. I found a small table in the back and listened to the conversations flowing around me. Heard Jessica has been returning expensive makeup for cash. Margaret Patterson's been paying their rent for months. Always seemed strange how well they lived on David's coffee shop wages. The information was spreading exactly as I had expected. Small towns were like living organisms. They processed information quickly and efficiently, separating truth from lies through collective wisdom. My phone rang as I was leaving the coffee shop. Betty Morrison, my neighbor from the old apartment building. Margaret, I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted you to know there's been a lot of arguing at your old place lately. Mostly Jessica yelling, but David too. Yesterday morning, a police car was parked outside for an hour. Thank you for letting me know, Betty. I appreciate you keeping me informed. Are you safe where you're staying? Do you need anything? The genuine concern in her voice reminded me that community support came in many forms. I'm fine, thank you. Just taking things one day at a time. That evening, I sat in my hotel room reviewing the day's conversations. The social pressure was building naturally, without any vindictive effort on my part. People simply recognized unfairness when they saw it clearly. My phone rang again. Unknown number, but I recognized the prefix. Probably one of David's creditors. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. This is Karen Webb from Millfield Credit Union. We're trying to reach David Patterson regarding an overdue personal loan. Please call us at your earliest convenience. They were calling me because David had probably listed my apartment as his address on loan applications. More evidence of deception. More proof that he had been planning to make me responsible for his debts without telling me. I deleted the message and opened my tablet. Time to update my evidence file with today's discoveries. I should have expected them to fight back. Jessica never was one to accept consequences quietly. Tuesday morning started peacefully enough. I was reviewing my bank statements over coffee when my phone started ringing constantly. First Tom from the diner, then Mrs. Chen, then Pastor Johnson. Each call brought the same disturbing news. Jessica was making rounds through town, spreading her own version of events. Margaret, I think you need to know what she's saying. Tom's voice carried barely controlled anger. She came in here about an hour ago, talking loud enough for everyone to hear, telling people you abandoned them without warning. Claims you promised to always support them, then changed your mind out of jealousy. What exactly did she say? That you're having some kind of breakdown. Said you kicked them out because David wouldn't let you control every decision in their relationship. Pause. She's also claiming there's a family medical emergency that requires money, and you're refusing to help. I thanked Tom and hung up, my mind already working through the implications. Jessica was desperate enough to launch a publicity campaign, which meant the pressure from losing my financial support was getting intense. The next call confirmed my suspicions. Mrs. Patterson, this is Detective Martinez. I wanted to give you a heads up. Jessica Thompson was here this morning filing a complaint about elder abuse. Claims you're being manipulated by someone at the bank to make bad financial decisions. Elder abuse. Complete nonsense, of course. But she's trying to create an official record that you're mentally incompetent. I told her we'd need medical documentation and witness statements, which she obviously can't provide. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. David's number. Mom, please answer. I know you're upset, but there are things you don't understand. His voice was thick with emotion, real or fake, I couldn't tell anymore. Jessica's pregnant, Mom. The stress from all this is making her really sick. The doctor says if things don't calm down soon, she could lose the baby. I felt a familiar tug in my stomach, the same protective instinct that had made me vulnerable to their manipulation for months. But something in his tone seemed rehearsed, desperate in a calculated way. Congratulations on the pregnancy, sweetheart. When did you find out? 2 weeks ago. Right before everything went wrong. His voice cracked convincingly. Mom, I can't let Jessica lose our baby because of money problems. You always said family comes first. Family does come first. That's why I spent $15,000 on your education and $8,000 on your wedding. But what about now? What about your grandchild? The question hung in the air between us. If Jessica was really pregnant, if there was really a medical crisis, then my actions could hurt an innocent baby. But the timing seemed too convenient, the emotional manipulation too polished. David, have you seen a doctor about these pregnancy complications? We have an appointment next week. Which doctor? Dr. Susan Taylor at the Women's Clinic. I knew Dr. Taylor. My sister had seen her when she was pregnant. I'll call her office to see how I can help with medical expenses. Mom, you don't need to call. If there's a genuine medical emergency involving my grandchild, I want to help. Dr. Taylor will know the best way to handle payment. David's voice became sharp. You can't just call Jessica's doctor. That's private information. You're right. You can have her call me directly to discuss payment options. The call ended abruptly. An hour later, I was walking downtown when I ran into Jessica outside the bank. She was talking loudly to anyone who would listen, her voice carrying that aggressive edge I had learned to recognize. She's lost her mind, Jessica was saying to a small crowd of people waiting for the bus. Crazy old woman thinks everyone's trying to steal from her. Kicked her own pregnant daughter-in-law out over nothing. I approached calmly, and the crowd noticed me before Jessica did. Faces turned in my direction, expressions shifting as they recognized the subject of Jessica's complaints. Jessica spun around, her face turning red with anger. There she is. The woman who abandoned her own family. Hello, Jessica. I kept my voice level. How's the credit card fraud situation working out? The accusation hit her like a physical blow. Several people in the crowd whispered among themselves, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. You're crazy, Jessica sputtered. I don't know what you're talking about. $800 worth of fraudulent returns, according to Detective Martinez. Peterson's drugstore, Miller's department store. Mostly expensive items returned for cash. I looked at the gathering crowd. Amazing how much money someone can steal when they're not paying their own rent. Jessica's face went from red to purple. She stepped closer, using her height like a weapon. You senile old witch. You can't just... I can document every dollar I've spent supporting you for 8 months, I interrupted. Can you document where David's paychecks actually went? The crowd was listening intently now, processing this new information. Jessica realized she had lost control of the narrative. Come on, she growled, pushing through the crowd. This isn't over, Margaret. I watched her storm away, noting how several people pulled out their phones. The real story would be all over Facebook within the hour. Back at the hotel, I opened my tablet and began documenting the day's events. Jessica's counterattack was failing because it was built on lies that couldn't survive examination. The community knew my character too well to believe her accusations of mental breakdown or vindictive abandonment. But the pregnancy claim worried me. If Jessica was really pregnant, the situation became more complicated. I needed verification before making my next move. I picked up my phone and called Dr. Taylor's office. If there was a real medical emergency, I would help, But I wouldn't be manipulated by fake crises. Jessica's public threats had crossed a line. I walked back to my hotel room, pulled out my phone and called Detective Martinez. "Detective, we need to talk. Jessica's behavior today showed a pattern of escalation that concerns me." "How so?" "She confronted me publicly, made threatening gestures in front of witnesses, and her whole attitude suggested someone losing control." I looked out my hotel window toward downtown. "I'd like to file a formal complaint and explore protection options. Come in tomorrow morning. Bring any documentation you have." But I didn't need to wait until morning. Mike Stevens, the Sunset Manor night security guard, knocked on my door an hour later. "Mrs. Patterson, that young woman who was yelling in our parking lot earlier, she came back about 30 minutes ago. Stood outside your door for maybe 10 minutes, then left. Made some other guests nervous." Mike was a retired police officer who had seen enough trouble to recognize it developing. "Did she say anything specific?" "Muttered something about teaching old ladies lessons. I've got it on security camera if you need it." Security footage. Physical evidence of Jessica's threatening behavior on private property. "Mike, would you be willing to provide that footage to the police?" "Absolutely. Someone like that shouldn't be intimidating elderly residents." The next morning, I arrived at the police station with Mike's security DVD and a written timeline of Jessica's escalating behavior. Detective Martinez reviewed everything with professional thoroughness. "Margaret, this shows a clear pattern of intimidation. Combined with what I witnessed yesterday at the bank, we have grounds for a restraining order." "What would that involve?" "Legal prohibition against Jessica coming within 300 feet of you or your property. Violation means immediate arrest." Detective Martinez leaned back in her chair. "There's something else you should know. Jessica consulted with a lawyer yesterday about tenants' rights laws." The words hit me like ice water. "Squatters' rights." "Exactly. She was researching whether she could claim legal right to stay in your apartment based on living there continuously." The detective's expression was grim. "California requires 6 months of continuous occupation. They've been there 8 months. She was planning to claim tenants' rights to MY apartment." "That's right. But since you've been paying the rent and they never signed a lease or paid any utilities, there's no legal basis." Detective Martinez pulled out a file folder. "But it shows premeditation. She's been planning this theft for months." "What about the restraining order?" "I can expedite it given the evidence. You'll have it by this afternoon." I left the police station with a new understanding of my daughter-in-law's character. The sandwich incident hadn't been about establishing dominance. It had been about maintaining control over someone she planned to rob systematically. Walking back to my car, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Time to make some strategic calls. The first was to Karen Webb at Millfield Credit Union, one of David's creditors who had been calling my number. "Ms. Webb, I'm returning your call about David Patterson. I need to clarify something important. He doesn't live at my address anymore and has no legal claim to my apartment. He listed that address as his residence on all loan applications. He was a guest in my home. I asked him to leave last week. If you're looking for him, he works at Mountain Coffee on First Street." The second call was to Pacific Collection Services. "This is Margaret Patterson. You've been calling about David Patterson's debts. I want to clarify that Mr. Patterson has no ownership interest in my property and is no longer living there." Each call was brief and factual. I wasn't paying David's debts or sharing personal information, just correcting the false address he had been using to avoid his creditors. By lunch, I had contacted 4 different collection agencies. David's carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. That afternoon, Judge Williams signed my restraining order. Jessica Thompson was now legally prohibited from coming within 300 feet of me or my property. Violation would result in immediate arrest and possible jail time. I drove back to Sunset Manor, feeling the satisfaction of justice properly applied. Jessica had spent months planning to steal my home through legal technicalities. Now she couldn't even approach it legally. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over, old lady." I forwarded the message to Detective Martinez, then blocked the number. Evidence collection had become second nature. Wednesday morning, I filed the restraining order with the court. By noon, I was watching Jessica's world collapse from multiple directions. The courthouse clerk stamped the final copy with official authority. "Mrs. Patterson, this order is effective immediately. Any contact or approach within 300 feet constitutes a violation." I thanked her and walked to my car, knowing the sheriff's deputy would serve Jessica the papers within hours. My phone was already ringing. "Margaret, this is Jim Miller from Mountain Coffee." Jim was David's boss, a decent man who had built his coffee shop on reputation and trust. "I need to ask you something directly. Are the things David's been saying about you true?" "What has he been saying?" "That you had some kind of mental breakdown and threw them out because of dementia? That there's a family medical emergency and you're refusing to help out of spite?" Jim's voice carried skepticism. "Thing is, Margaret, I've known you for 15 years. This doesn't sound like the woman who helped organize our Christmas charity drive every year." "Jim, Jessica gave me an ultimatum to follow her orders or leave. Chose to leave. There's no medical emergency, and my mental faculties are fine, as my banker, lawyer, and police detective can confirm." Long pause. "I was afraid of that. Margaret, I've got 2 customers today who mentioned Jessica owing them money. One recognized her from the electronics store where she was trying to return expensive items. This is affecting my business reputation. I understand. I'm going to have to let David go. Can't have this kind of controversy around customers who trust us with their morning routine." 20 minutes later, I was having coffee at Corner Coffee when I saw the first debt collector pull up to my former apartment building. Pacific Collection Services, based on the door magnet. I had spoken with them yesterday about David's false address claims. My phone rang. David's number. "Mom, there are men at the apartment asking about our debts. They want to know about our assets, our income, everything." His voice carried genuine panic now, not the calculated desperation from before. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth, that you own the apartment and we don't live here anymore. But they're talking about wage garnishment, asset seizure." "Mom, I don't understand any of this." "Sweetheart, that's what happens when someone borrows money they can't repay. Those are consequences David created, not me." "But how much do I owe? How is this possible?" So he really hadn't known the full extent. Personal loans, credit cards. About $3,000 total, according to Detective Martinez. Silence on the line, then quietly. "Jessica told me those were medical bills from when she got sick last year." "I'm sorry you're learning this way, David." "And the sheriff's deputy was here too. Served Jessica some kind of legal papers. She's been screaming and throwing things ever since." The restraining order. Jessica was probably just realizing that her options had disappeared completely. "Mom, she's talking about leaving town. Says there's nothing left here for her." His voice cracked with real emotion this time. "What am I supposed to do? Make decisions based on who Jessica really is, not who you hope she was." That evening, I parked across the street from my former apartment building and watched the chaos unfold. 2 different creditor vehicles had visited during the day. Betty Morrison from next door waved at me sadly. She had been watching the situation develop with the concern of a long-time neighbor. Through the living room window, I could see David and Jessica arguing. His gestures looked confused, hurt. Hers looked desperate, angry. The fantasy marriage built on my financial support was crumbling as reality intruded. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike at Sunset Manor. That woman tried to get past the front desk again. Told her about the restraining order. She left, but she was really upset. I forwarded the message to Detective Martinez. Jessica was violating the restraining order within hours of being served. Her desperation was making her reckless, which made her dangerous. But it also made her predictable. A desperate woman with debts, no income, and legal troubles had limited options. She could face her responsibilities like an adult, or she could run. Given what I had learned about Jessica's character, running seemed most likely. I drove back to Sunset Manor, considering the implications. If Jessica fled town to escape her legal troubles, what would happen to David? Would he go with her, choosing loyalty to someone who had deceived him for months? Or would he finally see her clearly and make a different choice? Either way, the consequences were theirs to face. I had spent 8 months protecting them from reality. That protection had ended the day they asked me to choose between my dignity and their demands. I had chosen dignity. Now they could choose their own path forward. 2 days of watching their desperation was enough. I called David Thursday morning and told him to meet me at the diner. Just him. I can't leave Jessica alone right now, Mom. She's really struggling with everything that's happening. Then we have nothing to discuss. The restraining order means I can't be around her anyway. Long pause. Where do you want to meet? Corner coffee, 2 p.m. Back table where we can talk privately. I arrived early and chose the table facing away from the street. I wanted this conversation to focus on words, not worried glances at passing cars. When David arrived, he looked older than his 26 years. Stress lines around his eyes, nervous fidgeting with his phone. He sat down across from me and immediately started talking. Mom, I know you're angry, but Jessica lost her job yesterday, and these debt collectors won't leave us alone. The phone rings every hour. People keep showing up at the door demanding money we don't have. I waited until he finished, then spoke calmly. I'm offering you one chance to end this with some dignity, David. What do you mean? Public acknowledgement of the truth. Full disclosure of how much I've supported you both, and an honest explanation of why I left. His face flushed red. You want me to humiliate myself in front of the whole town? I want you to tell the truth. There's a difference. What kind of acknowledgement? I had spent 2 days thinking through exactly what justice required. Church announcement Sunday during sharing time. Letter to the editor of the Millfield Tribune. Facebook post visible to all our mutual friends. Full details about college tuition, wedding costs, rent payments, and the ultimatum that caused me to leave. Mom, people will think. People will think you had a mother who loved you enough to sacrifice her retirement security for your happiness, and that you took it for granted until it was gone. David stared at his untouched coffee. What about Jessica? Jessica is no longer part of any equation involving me. The restraining order is permanent. If you choose to stay married to her, that's your decision. But it means choosing her over any relationship with me. You're asking me to choose between my wife and my mother. I'm asking you to choose between someone who threatened me and someone who raised you. The fact that you see those as equivalent choices tells me everything about how far we've drifted apart. He was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. What about the apartment? It's been in our family for 3 generations. My parents lived there, your father and I lived there. It's going to the Millfield Women's Shelter. 3 families of women escaping domestic violence will live there. People who understand what survival and courage actually mean. The words hit him like a physical blow. The lease has already been transferred, witnessed, signed, and filed with my attorney. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Even if you do everything I've asked perfectly, the apartment won't come back to you. That decision is final. Why? Because I need to know that any reconciliation between us is based on love, not inheritance expectations. For 8 months you treated me like a convenient ATM machine. I want to see if there's anything left between us beyond financial dependency. David's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time, not the calculated manipulation I had grown accustomed to. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I never meant for things to go this far. Sorry isn't enough anymore, sweetie. The whole town watched you and Jessica treat me like a servant in my own home. They watched you choose her demands over my dignity. Words are just words now. I need to see actions. What if I can't do it? What if I can't stand up in front of everyone and admit how wrong we were? Then you'll live with the consequences of that choice. Jessica will probably leave town to escape her legal troubles. Women like her always run when things get difficult. You can go with her and start over somewhere else, or you can stay here and try to rebuild your life with honesty. And if I do what you're asking, then maybe over time we can build a real relationship, not based on money or guilt or obligation, but on mutual respect between two adults. David wiped his eyes with a napkin. How long do I have to decide? Sunday morning. Church starts at 10 a.m. If you're not there to tell the truth, I'll know you've made your choice. He stood slowly, looking older and more fragile than when he had arrived. Mom, do you think you could ever forgive me? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw glimpses of the little boy who used to build blanket forts and ask for one more bedtime story. Forgiveness and trust are different things, David. I forgave you the day I decided to leave rather than fight. But trust has to be earned back, one honest action at a time. He nodded and walked toward the door, shoulders bent under the weight of a decision that would determine the rest of his life. I remained at the table, watching him drive away. Sunday was 3 days away. By then, I would know whether my son had the courage to choose truth over comfort, responsibility over loyalty to someone who had never deserved it. Sunday morning arrived bright and clear. I walked into St. Paul's Methodist Church, wondering if David would find the courage to tell the truth. The sanctuary was fuller than usual. Word had gotten around about some kind of family announcement. I took my regular pew 4 rows from the front and waited. Pastor Johnson began the service with familiar hymns and readings, but I could feel the congregation's anticipatory energy. When sharing time came, David stood from the back row. He looked small walking down the center aisle, but his steps were steady. At the podium, he gripped the edges and looked out at faces he had known his entire life. I need to tell you all something important about my mother. His voice carried clearly through the silent sanctuary. For the past 8 months, Margaret Patterson has been supporting my wife and me financially. She paid $15,000 for my college education when I could have gone to trade school for free. She paid $8,000 for my wedding when Jessica's family couldn't afford their share. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. These were specific numbers, documented sacrifices that painted a clear picture. She gave us her family apartment, the place where her parents lived, where she lived with my father for 15 years. When we couldn't make rent payments, she paid them. When we needed food, utilities, phone service, she paid for everything while living on Social Security. His voice strengthened as he continued. 3 weeks ago, when my mother wouldn't follow my wife's orders like a servant, we gave her an ultimatum: obey Jessica or leave her own home. Mom chose to leave rather than surrender her dignity. The sanctuary was completely silent now. Even the babies seemed to sense the gravity of his words. I stood by and watched my wife disrespect the woman who sacrificed her retirement security for our comfort. I chose loyalty to someone who threatened my mother over loyalty to the woman who raised me with love and patience. Tears flowed freely now, but his voice remained clear. I'm standing here because my mother offered me one last chance to choose truth over pride. I was wrong. Jessica was wrong. My mother deserved gratitude and respect, and instead we gave her ultimatums and demands. He looked directly at me. Mom, I'm sorry isn't enough for what we put you through, but I'm hoping it's a start. The congregation erupted in supportive murmurs as David returned to his seat. Pastor Johnson approached the podium with tears in his own eyes. Sometimes the hardest courage is admitting our mistakes publicly. David has shown that courage today, and his mother has shown us what dignity looks like under pressure. After the service, people approached me with hugs, handshakes, and words of support. Mrs. Chen squeezed my hand. We all suspected you were helping them financially, Margaret. What we didn't know was how they repaid your kindness. Tom from the coffee shop patted my shoulder. That took real character, what you did. Setting boundaries isn't easy when family's involved. But the most meaningful moment came when David approached me outside the church. The letter to the Tribune will run Wednesday. The Facebook post goes up tonight. He hesitated. Jessica left town yesterday, packed her car while I was at work and disappeared. No forwarding address, no note, nothing. I wasn't surprised. Women like Jessica always ran when confronted with consequences. I'm sorry your marriage ended this way. I'm not, he said quietly. I filed for divorce this morning. Found out she'd been planning to take money from my work register. The debts are worse than we thought. 3 months later, I stood in the front yard of my former apartment building, watching 3 families of domestic violence survivors move into the transitional housing units the Millfield Women's Shelter had created. The building had been renovated into separate apartments, each family getting privacy while sharing common areas. Maria Santos, recently escaped from an abusive relationship, directed her 2 children toward the playground equipment donated by local businesses. Mrs. Patterson, this opportunity means everything to us. Thank you for choosing survivors for this gift. Survivors understand courage, I replied. This building should serve people who've actually earned it. My own life had settled into peaceful routines at the lakeside cottage I had purchased with money no longer flowing to ungrateful dependents. Morning coffee on the porch overlooking the lake, afternoon gardening, evening reading. Simple pleasures that felt luxurious after months of financial stress and family drama. The cottage was small but perfectly suited to my needs. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen where I could cook real meals instead of eating restaurant food constantly, and a garden where I could grow my own vegetables. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Mom, I'm 3 months into counseling and learning a lot about healthy relationships. Could we try having coffee sometime? I'd like to earn your trust back, one conversation at a time. I smiled, looking out at the lake where a family of ducks was swimming near the shore. David had kept his word about the public acknowledgements. The newspaper letter had been thorough and honest. The Facebook post had generated dozens of supportive comments from community members who finally understood the real story. More importantly, he was taking responsibility for rebuilding our relationship instead of expecting forgiveness without effort. I typed back. Coffee sounds good. Saturday morning at the diner. His response came immediately. I'll be there. And Mom, thank you for not giving up on me completely. I set the phone aside and watched the ducks glide across the water with their babies following behind. Sometimes patience and dignity were rewarded, even when the wait seemed endless. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the lake's surface gold and pink. In the distance, I could hear children laughing at the women's shelter, families building new lives in the building where I had learned the difference between generosity and enabling. Justice served, dignity preserved, and maybe, just maybe, a son ready to earn back his mother's trust through honest effort rather than emotional manipulation. It had been worth the wait. If you like this story, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to Granny's Voice, and share your thoughts about this story in the comments. To listen to another story, click on the suggestion that appears on your screen. Thank you for watching Granny's Voice.